All right, welcome everybody. We have a special episode here today with Darren Gobb from Restore Liberty and, of course, General Holt, and we're going to get right into today's event. Thank you for both of you for being here today. And I'd like to begin our discussion with what occurred this week out of Baltimore and to get your opinion on this event and how it relates to the larger challenges that America faces internally and externally, and get your thoughts on what occurred.
Yeah, so I guess I'll jump in. You know, it's 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 not so shocking that we're going to now start seeing terror events come home. I know that the administration jumped right in, and before the sun even came up, they jumped to the conclusion that there's nothing to see here. This is just an accident. If
Mhm.
that were really the case, I mean, there's so much reporting to the contrary of that with credible sources by responsible journalists. But if that really weren't the case, then why would the president say, "Oh, the government's going to pay for this whole thing"? I'll tell you why the government's going to pay for that whole thing, even though they didn't pay for East Palestine, and after 9/11, they certainly didn't pay for the buildings to be put back. The reason that is because the government doesn't want insurance investigators poring over that ship to discuss what really happened. And just this morning, conveniently, the NTSB says that the last 2 minutes before impact were missing from the data voice recorder. And so, we see this time and time again. And I guess the folks in the government think they've got still have credibility, but for those of us who have worked in the government for over 30 years, that's just not the case. And even in Michael, even in my own circle, I now understand that it certainly was a cyber hit, and most of the arrows are pointing at Russia. But the fact that our government won't be transparent with us makes us ask questions about, well, what else is coming down the pike that we don't get to know about?
Darren, do you feel the same?
Yeah, very similar. I mean, ultimately, while I wait for any kind of actual substantial proof that this is a enemy action against us, which this is that's a reputational thing to say that in public, that it is an enemy attack against us. I'm still pending on that, but I lean towards it very heavily. But we know things happen. The bigger and broader issue here is that our government has worked so hard for so many decades against our own country, and to earn that status of not being trustworthy and telling us the most simple truths, that it's their fault ultimately. And they is a big broad picture, but it's ultimately their fault that the people of America generally don't believe anything they say. And right now, that's sadly a good position to start from as you're seeking the truth. I still am willing to entertain the idea that it was a complete accident. Stuff happens, but you have to really convince me at this point, because I don't really believe anymore that stuff just happens like that.
Well, zooming out for just one moment, I tend to agree with both of you, first of all. And the second of all, I think zooming out, a lot of people believe that this is part of the controlled demolition of America and America's economy, that all factors into the Great Reset. I wanted to know, number one, if you agree with that, and number two, if that is the case, what can we begin to do locally in our communities to deal with this?
Yeah, so I think that certainly is what I would call a reasonable possibility at this point, because the government and this administration is attacking on all fronts. When you see them just absolutely shred the Constitution, starting with, the protection of the United States, the southern and the northern border, millions of fighting age men walking around amongst us, hailing from all terror groups, hailing from state actors like the PLA or People's Liberation Army or Russian or Iranian operatives. When you see uh, courts espousing Second Amendment rights to these illegals, and yet in the exact same week, we see the Justice Department open up red flag laws to try to disarm an entire category of our society called the veterans of the United States.
Mhm.
Then, when you go to this event and you look at the economic catastrophe that we face as a nation now because of just the loss of Baltimore, with coal, natural gas exports, hazardous materials, the rerouting of the ships, missing $15 million a day. Well, it's not so hard to stomach that something greater is afoot here. And they have said to us in their own words several times that they want to fundamentally remake America. But when you get away from the glossy marketing and the brochures, with their friends, the World Economic Forum, you start to really understand that when you take all the shiny crap off of this, it's really just Marxism by any other name. And they're trying to employ it and they're trying to control our people. And they really can't get to their Great Reset or their New World Order until they have a United States population that's firmly under control. And, I don't think that they're going to pull it off. So that's the good news. But certainly, Michael, I don't find any trouble with postulating a theory that this is all part of the Great Reset as well.
And with that said, Darren, it seems to me, let's back up and say this because it's very important. With what we try to do with KSRG, it's never to unduly terrify, scare people, right? We're giving this information so that we can be better prepared for what's coming. I want to preface my remarks by saying that. Second of all, though, building on what Blaine just mentioned, I cannot help but think, especially because we are in a pivotal election year, that this is not an isolated incident, that we can expect not just more incidents like this, but other things. And I wonder what your thoughts are about that, Darren.
Sure. And I think that's one of the challenges with Restore Liberty, with Blaine and I both being the co-founders of that organization, is that we tend to always look at what's happened and then back out of it. We'll analyze it in detail, but we want to back out of it eventually too and say, okay, where does this fit in this bigger strategic view of really the world in general, and specifically the world's attempt through different organizations to tear down the United States? So if you just looked at this ship running into a bridge, all you're going to see really is a ship running into a bridge with many possibilities. But when you take a look at that against East Palestine and the train derailments and the other train derailments and the flotation devices that have gone across the United States, including just north of me here in Montana over our nuclear facilities, you can easily get to a position where you put all these together as a giant pattern and say, really all this is you're on a fire base in Vietnam and the enemy is probing the perimeter to find weaknesses, and they're everywhere. And the greatest strength we have in America is our patriots and our people. So first of all, attack them. But on the other hand, we at Restore Liberty and the organizations we work with, and your Kootenai County group as a result of that, is that our greatest strength is what we need to pull in to be part of the solution, using the eyes and ears and capabilities of the American veterans and the skills of people of many kinds across our population who still love this country.
I think also what you're mentioning, both of you, what it brings to mind to me is a mindset shift. For a very long time in this country, we have looked upwards. We've looked at our national leaders. Obviously, we've looked to the White House, different parts of the military, the government, even the media. But all of these institutions seem to be captured at this point, or largely captured. And so what it means to me is that we have to take a responsibility. We have to become more self-reliant. Would you agree with that? That a mind shift is needed in America in this year?
Yeah, I think I'll jump on that one this time and let Blaine clean me up. I'll make it very simple. If I had a dry erase board behind me, I would draw two pyramids, one with the point up and one with the point down. And this nation has, for too long, like you said, thought that the point up being was the idea that DC was the top. And you worked your way down through some sort of hierarchy down to the individual. The reality is it's the other pyramid where DC is actually at the bottom and the individual's at the top, and we're the ones with the power, and we can't give it up. We have to, well, and sadly, we've largely had, but we've got to take that power back, assert that power, and remind them that it's the individual, the family, the community, and all the way down to the federal government, which is supposed to be the least relevant in our lives.
Yeah, I got to agree exactly with that. But I think we're about to go through a real shaking, and you can look at the ship incident as part of that. But look how crime in our cities is just flowing over after they Soros-funded DAs got in charge, and look the other way on crime while the police were being defunded. And then you get the pouring of these illegals into our cities. As we speak right now, there are illegals that are boasting and putting on TikTok and gangs in New York City that they're randomly going through the city and punching women in the face, videotaping it, and getting it on the Chinese CCP sponsored platform TikTok. The three of us couldn't possibly have predicted any such thing 10 years ago. But what I think is going to happen is this arc is heading upward in danger, and Americans are about to see horrific things. And what's going to happen is whether you're a very liberal person or a very conservative person, you're going to unify around that, and you're going to find out that the problem is sitting right there in DC, and it's not just the administration, it's the entire ball of wax. And it gets right to what um, Darren's saying. And so what I think we're going to end up with is an electorate that by the end of the summer is pretty unified in demanding that these things start to get taken care of, that the government is put in its proper position. And I think when we talk about election integrity and how we're going to even have a free and fair election next time, I think you're going to find such angry Americans that they're all demanding paper ballots by summer's end, and that they're manually counted in those precincts.
Well, I very much hope that's true. And as horrific as that story that you're talking about with TikTok is, in some ways, I think it's, for lack of a better word, helpful to shake us out of our complacency, something that we've needed to do for a long time. But building on that threat that you mentioned there, and this is a question for either one of you, I think there is pronounced chatter about other types of risks. So an EMP attack would be one of them. Also, terrorist attacks coming from any of the border penetrations. I wondered if either one of you could talk about those concerns, both the EMP attack and potential terrorist attacks coming up soon. Maybe
Yeah,
Darren.
so Darren, you want to jump that one first?
Yeah.
Sure, why not? We'll do a 2-for-2 split here. Excuse me. Yeah, no. Well, first of all, terrorism is absolutely a concern, and every American is right to have their eyes and ears open concerning something like that. And so I think I mentioned yesterday that the difference between terrorism and criminality is not much in the end. It's just sometimes it's a matter of scale and purpose.
Right.
But that's why we focus on community rebuild and community defense. Is ultimately no one's better prepared for these types of things and has more eyes than the local community does. They have to take ownership of it. Now, tied to that, though, is the ability of nation states, even through minor actors, to conduct an EMP attack on either an entire nation at a time or in critical nodes or infrastructure that could have a larger impact than just their geographical location. Let's talk about power grids and their stations that they have, our ability to communicate via cell phones and all these other different kinds of things are at risk under something like an EMP attack, which could be EMP alone or EMP tied to nuclear, which I find that one being the least likely. Again, all this comes down to local community action and preparedness to do the best you can with what you have in anticipation of something horrible happening, whether it be intentional or natural disaster or something else. At the same time, hoping it never does. Regardless, you've strengthened your community.
Agreed.
Right. I think that's exactly correct, Darren. We see things coming about now in the nation. We have Rolodexes that lead to very qualified people who are filling us with warnings that we know we should take heed on. And it's everything from the illegals getting their funds cut off by the UN and going bananas to a potential type of EMP thing that your government may even tell you, oh, that's a solar flare. So that could all come about. We don't know that it's going to come about. We encourage in the County Guardian program and then locally here, Michael, at KSRG, hey, look, there's no certainties, but there are probabilities, and it is a good time for us to come together as a community, because if we're not bound as a community, then we're in a real vulnerable situation. But where people get hung up is when the balloon goes up, or that's what our military way of saying the bad things start to happen. Everybody starts to flagellate and go, oh my gosh, I don't have 5 years of food. I don't have Faraday bags. I don't have this. Well, you do the best you can to get ready. And when the show starts, it's whatever you got on, that's where you're going to be in the show. But the community piece is really irreplaceable. And so getting with groups, getting with like-minded individuals like we're doing in our county guardian here in Kootenai County is to get the word out, get like-minded people enthusiastic, understand that we have roles and responsibilities as citizens, that we can't just sit back and go, oh, the sheriff will save me or the first responders will come save me. That's the critical step. That's far and away the most important thing. All the other stuff, well, you find a way to manage. When Darren and I are both military pilots, and when or Darren would say an aviator, but when you get to we go through this thing called Survival, Escape, Resistance, and Evasion School, SEER School.
Mhm.
And honestly, the scenario sets up with you coming out of a parachute because you ejected from your airplane or you jumped out of your airplane. And basically, you've got a parachute harness on a few paper clips and a knife, and that's it. And you get started from there. So it's not like you're taking into the jungle all the things you would want to have with you. That's what's so important to remember. It's what you take an assessment. Well, what do I have? What can I use? And then the riches and the wealth you have is if there's a team with you, if there's folks with you that you can bind yourself to. And that's why the community is so important.
In our remaining moments here, I wanted to ask a two-part question, and we'll just put out to either one that wants to begin this question. So the first thing is, we are very fortunate in Kootenai County that we have very like-minded people, and we've had a wonderful response in terms of community building here. But my question is, what if you live in a different community in which it's extremely partisan and extremely divided? How do you begin to unite people without unduly scaring them? Question one. And then question two would be, what are some practical tips that people can begin doing today? Because I think a lot of this is people feel just so overwhelmed. What are one or two or three things that we can begin doing now? And I'll violate this. Let's go to Darren. Question one to you. What do we
Sure.
do for communities that are not united in the way that we are in Kootenai County? And then I'll go to Blaine for question two.
Perfect. Yep. I think I answered question 2 yesterday anyway, so we'll see how much they match up.
Sure.
But honestly, the difference between Kootenai County and Lewis and Clark County, Montana, is exactly the difference that you're speaking of. I live in the state capital, and you'd think that in Montana, this so-called deep red state, which it's really not, we would have the ability to do that here, and not in this county. We're very Democrat heavy, big government, and all the stuff that goes along with that. So, if you find yourself wondering why you can't gather 4,000 or 5,000 people together to do something like this, you can't worry about it. What you can do is you can start with one or two and develop the initial part of a plan and some thoughts and some things. What do you need skill set wise? What do you need people wise? What can I start building now? In the military, we also use a term called hardening. So I can harden myself and I can harden my family, which means I've got that food, water, shelter plan, communications amongst ourselves, whatever that looks like. I've got something. But as you look down the road to what does this look like at something more like a midway or an end state, you can't always get everybody on board right away. But what you can identify around your communities are those people who are able to be leadership for when people do wake up and realize what is happening, or they're looking for something to go to that is more than a city commission that can actually help you get through hard times. Here I'm focused on developing the leadership and the basic skills in a small team. So when something like that bad happens, people know where to go to get the help they really need, because most of it does not fall in government, it falls with us.
Wonderful. And final question then with Blaine to you. What's one of the three things that people can begin doing now?
The thing that you need to do, and I think Darren just said it so well, personally, get yourself hardened, take care of some needs. You're not going to be useful to your community if you're the person in your neighborhood with only 2 hours of Chinese takeout food, and you haven't really even thought about all of your other needs. And by the way, if the city water stops, so do you. That's not helpful to your community. So think of ways that you can help yourself and then be helpful when your community goes, hey, what do you got and what can you help us with? Think that way. And then the other parts are get out and talk to your neighbors, get to know them if you don't already, because you may find out some of them are big liabilities to you. We in my local area, we've got a couple of neighbors who would really go, oh, this is just crazy tinfoil hat stuff. The point is they will make that Saul to Paul conversion in a couple of weeks when they start to see really bad stuff on TV, and then they're going to be coming over going, hey, well, what can I do? So, I don't castigate those people. I know they're coming our way. They don't know that yet, but you should really take stock of who's who in your neighborhood and who's ready for that talk now, and then identify the folks that, go check in on them after they see a few more females get their faces punched in New York and they're finally ready to talk turkey.
Well, that's a great way to end this conversation. I want to thank both of you immensely for all of your insights and advice. And until next time, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Mike.